what makes a superstar a star? And what I'm about to say is Jamal Murray's injury. And I saw the voting, so it may not, but I thought initially Jamal Murray's injury could affect the MVP race as far as Denver in the record, because in my opinion, I was saying it kind of early on. I went and looked at it when Embiid got hurt. Jokic was quietly having an all-time great season from both a traditional stat level and advanced stat level. Like, he was literally leading in every advanced category for the most part, and some of them wasn't even close. Talk about what makes a superstar and a star, and then we'll kind of interwoven that with the MVP race.
Are you ready?
Well, I kind of break it down into tiers.
Okay.
You know, and I think we can start from the top or the bottom, but just to kind of start from the bottom and work our way up to that level. You know, I think you have your bench players, right? These are the guys who, you know, they may not even get into the course of the season. They may be more practice guys. They may play when it's a blowout. So you got your bench players. Then you've got your that's your bench warmers. Okay, so
right.
That's the bottom of your bench warmers. Then you've got your bench players. Then you've got your role players. Then you've got your starters, and then you start transitioning into what I call like a borderline all-star. So these are guys who have the all-star talent but have never made an all-star team, similar to like a Jamal Murray, right? Where I think the potential is there, but he actually hasn't done it yet. Then you've got that all-star tier, and then you have the superstar tier. And I think that's where you go into your question. And that superstar tier, what separates that from an all-star, in my opinion, is you've got to not only become an all-star, which is obviously the tier below that, and actually have that on your resume, but you've got to be in my opinion, the best player on a team that has gone to the playoffs. For instance, a guy like Zion Williamson, who's my favorite player in the NBA, he's a borderline superstar. But until he's able to take that Pelican team to the playoffs, I can't put him in that superstar category yet. Luka Doncic, I think he has crossed over into that superstar category from his first season to his second season when he took Dallas Mavericks to the playoffs. So being able to take your team to the playoffs, I think as the best player on the team, I think can put you in a superstar status. A guy like a CJ McCollum, once again, he's never made an all-star team. He's never been the best player on the team, though his talent could be quote unquote all-star level. I put him on that borderline all-star level. But superstar in particular is the top, the highest of the guys. And remember, just because you get there at one point doesn't mean you always stay there for the rest of your career. It's a sliding scale. Chris Paul used to be a superstar. In my opinion, Chris Paul's not a superstar anymore. He's graduated down to the all-star level because he used to be good enough to where he was the best player on a team that could take you to the playoffs. That may not necessarily be the case anymore, even as we saw last year when he did that with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think we're seeing him to continuously drop down, and I think so he's one of those guys who's kind of on that all-star board, superstar border. Look at a guy like Paul George. Paul George is another guy I look at where I think in Indiana and even in Oklahoma City, I think he was a superstar. And I think, because of injuries, unfortunately, I think he's kind of dropped down kind of off that superstar level as he's trying to regain that. But I think that kind of just how I kind of put a general broad stroke or idea on how I kind of separate guys and what it takes to get to that next level.
I agree 100%. Like, I had on my list, I had Carmelo, I had Westbrook, and I had Chris Paul as former superstars. And now stars. And then of course I had like LeBron, I had AD, I had Giannis, I had Jokic, going off the top of my head, Harden, Durant. I didn't have Kyrie. People were kind of upset about that, but I'm like, no, because I feel like you have to be in the MVP conversation at some point in your career, all NBAs, all stars, and then leading your team to the playoffs like consistently every year. Yeah, so I think we throw that term and that label out too far, in my humble opinion, and we see it with the cream every year rising to the top. And again, when I alluded to with the MVP race, I felt like Jokic has shown that he's finally in that superstar range. I felt like Embiid was having that type of season. We know what LeBron's getting. The one that was head scratching, how people were just ignoring him and that fatigue, was Giannis. Giannis was still putting up great numbers. The only thing that went down when you look at it is his rebounds by a couple, his points by a couple, but everything else was still up, was still high. And because he's not scoring as much, because they added Drew Holiday, Bobby Portis. Like, they added other players. So what do you think about the MVP this year? Do you think it's Jokic or Embiid at this point? Or let me say this. Where were you prior to LeBron James getting hurt? And then since all these injuries have shooken out, who you think is in the front runner now to win the MVP?
Well, if we go back a couple of weeks, I can't remember exactly what the date was, but prior to LeBron and Joel Embiid's injury, I had those two as the number one, number two, and I had Joel Embiid number one because the Sixers had a slightly better record at that time. I think they were the number one seed. The Lakers were number two in the West. And so I had Joel Embiid because of his stats, which were amazing, and I had him number one. Okay, LeBron was right on his heels, so it was extremely close. However, once LeBron got injured and once Joel Embiid got injured, both of those guys have dropped out of my top five. And the reason I had to drop them both out of my top five is not from a statistical standpoint, it's from an availability standpoint, which is the best ability. Joel Embiid's already missed 18 games. And the reality is that if we're going to say you're the most valuable player, then how are you the most valuable player if you're not on the court with your team, allowing them to have the best chance to win games? And so when you look at guys like a Jokic, guys like a Dame Lillard, like a Giannis, other guys who've only missed 2 games here, 3 games there, maybe 6 games max with these other superstars, and their team's records are similar, and their stats are similar, I can't put Embiid or LeBron over those guys. And so because of that, to me right now, Jokic is the front runner for MVP. And there's one thing that I've always tried to gauge my MVP rankings off of, which was the guys that were in the top 3 seed in their conference. Now, I'm going to preface this because Jokic currently is not in that spot, but I wanted to kind of go back for a second. Typically, if you look over the last 40 years, the MVP has been won 39 out of the last 40 years. That winner was on a top 3 seed in his conference. Okay, the one exception was the Russell Westbrook year, where he averaged a triple-double for the first time since 1962, I believe, when Oscar Robertson did it.
Yep.
And so that was a historical season, right? And if you remember the years since then when he's averaged triple-double, it doesn't have the same impact because he just did it. So when I'm looking at a person like Jokic, he's on a historical pace this season. He's going to, if things hold as they are, he's going to have the highest average of assists in the history of the game for a center, which will have surpassed Wilt Chamberlain. I think it was back in 1961 or 67, 107, back in the 60s, can't remember exact year, when Wilt Chamberlain led, when he led all centers, averaging 8.6 assists during that time. And I think Jokic recently is around 8.7. So if Jokic is able to keep Denver,
he's 8.8. He's 8.8. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. If Jokic is able to keep Denver in that top 4 range, now he can't slip down to 6 in my opinion, right? But if he can stand it, because it's too much other competition around him. But if he's able to keep them in the top 4, at low, maybe top 5, at worst case scenario, then yes, I think he deserves it. Like I said, his ability to score, to shoot, to rebound, to pass. I mean, it's just he's a walking triple-double. But the name that I think that I have to mention, I got to give him a lot of respect because there's too much disrespect going on, is a guy that unfortunately may have actually just ended his case, is Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell shows up on no MVP ladders, races. I saw, I think NBA.com just did a MVP race, and they had Donovan Mitchell not even in the top 10. And to me, that's crazy because he's the best player on the best team as far as record-wise, right? The best player on the best team, and he's averaging I think like 26 points, like 4 or 5 rebounds, 4 or 5 assists. So he's giving you the numbers, and he's giving you the wins, and he's a two-way player. How is he not even in the conversation? So to me, that's too much disrespect, and I think there's too much. Sometimes the MVP is too much narrative based, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. Let me ask you this: are you an advanced stats guy with certain things, or no?
Sometimes yes. I sometimes it goes too far. right? I think, you know, I think there's certain ways you can put things in context. I don't take the advanced stats and put them in too much light, but I do like to look at them. I like to look at advanced team stats more so than player stats. You know, for instance, the offensive rating, defensive rating, net ratings for the teams, those have shown true to hold true when I'm trying to project my NBA champions. That has held true since they created that stat. So that's why I follow that stat, because it doesn't have any outliers, right?
Right.
But when it comes to the advanced individual stats, those become a little bit more skewed, where you can get a guy like a Boban Marjanovic who may play limited minutes, but his PR is just ridiculous because when he's on the court in that limited time, he's doing just enough from a field goal percentage standpoint, from a rebound, from a block, you know, whatever the case may be, and his PR is you know, all-time great level, whatever. So yes or no?
I'll say this though, I don't look at PER. It's kind of flawed, but the ones I do like, I like win shares. I like offensive win shares. I like defensive win shares. The box plus minus, whether it's offense or defense. And when you look at it, so just for example, box plus minus is the box score points
right
per 100 possessions, because we know they figured this out, about 100 possessions per game, above the league average player translated on an average team. For example, these are your box plus minus guys. Jokic is 1, Giannis is 2, Embiid is 3, Steph is 4, LeBron James is 5, Jimmy Butler is 6, Donovan Mitchell, he's not even on here, but you get where I'm going. Luka is like 7. For example, Jokic is almost 12 points above everybody else. Giannis is like 8.5. If you look at the offensive one, again, Jokic, Curry, Lillard, Embiid, Doncic, James Harden, LeBron James, Giannis. So for me, when I look at these, to your point, I don't see any really outliers. Like, these are all names that should be being brought up. Yeah, right. Donovan Mitchell's on here at 19. He's at 4.1. But for giving some context to show you the gap, Jokic again is leading at 9.3. So he's responsible for like 9.3 above the average over 100 possessions. Steph is right there. Steph is somebody I thought had an interesting case from the standpoint. I mean, if anything, Hannibal, he shut all the naysayers up this season. Like, at this point, he's shown that he is one of the best we've seen this season with the 30 points that he's putting up, shooting the ball at an incredible clip. But that would be my argument with the advanced stats. PER, I agree, because you'll see, like, for example, certain people. What did I see this year that was interesting? Might have been like Nerlens Noel or something on the defensive one was kind of high, and it was like Nerlens Noel. But
if you have the list in front of you, see where John Morant ranks on there.
For which one?
Either one. My question is, put in context, is in comparison to Steph Curry before I make my point.
He's not even in the top 20 of offensive or box plus minus.
And that's the point why I don't like to look so much at. Go ahead.
Some of the other names, though, so you can have context.
Okay.
Zion, Lillard, Bam, Paul George, who's played well this year, Chris Paul, Tobias. They're all on the box plus minus side. Tobias Harris is actually 20th at 4.1. On the offensive side, again, Kyrie Irving, Kawhi Leonard, who was like 50, 40, 90, Trae Young, Bradley Beal, Paul George, Zach LaVine, who's had an all-star great year, Donovan, I said, and then Jason Tatum. So all the names you would expect, there's no outliers on here. Like, all the names you would expect are on here.
No, I get my point was that I was going to make about the John Morant and Steph Curry is that you alluded to Steph Curry as far as having it, I guess, not necessarily saying a favorite, but an MVP case at some point, or you were alluding to something along
the numbers and everything. He's been carrying that inconsistent Warriors team. Like, he's played well this year.
I think he has played well, but I think what I like to do is look at the Warriors right now. If I'm not mistaken, you correct me if you have it in front of you. I believe they're in the 9th seed, if I'm not mistaken, right now. I'm gonna check it real quick. And we know Steph Curry has played the entire season without his second best player in Klay Thompson, right? So we give him, quote unquote, we're giving him a pass because we're saying, listen, you're great. We know that. And if Klay Thompson was there, we know that you all would be much better than what you are right now. You wouldn't be a 9th seeded team right now if Klay Thompson was there. We get that. However, when I look at a guy like John Morant, who also is missing his second best player for most of the season in Jaren Jackson, right? Why? How is it that Golden State with this great Steph Curry doesn't even have a better record than John Morant, who's younger than him, plays the same position as him, and has had his second best player not playing for most of the season? Has Curry really, and this is the question I want to throw back to you, individually, we know his stats are insane.
Right.
But has he really had as great of a season as he should have in comparison to some of the names we want to compare him to or in the past greats, we'll call it? For instance, you look at a guy like LeBron James, you look at a guy like Kobe Bryant, you look at some of these other all-time great players, right? When they didn't have the top teams, right, they were still able to take their teams to the playoffs for the most part. There was a couple of outlier years, right? Outlier years. But when they were healthy, like we just look at LeBron with the Lakers, 2019, up until the point where LeBron got hurt in that Christmas Day game against Golden State, the Lakers were the 4th seed at that point. And so we're looking at Golden State, who Curry's been there, and he's got Draymond Green, who's a former All-Star, who's a triple-double in Swiss Army knife, right? They got a championship head coach. They have some other smaller pieces in Oubre and Wiggins that they're role players, right? They're starter role player level. But does he have more than what John Morant has? I wouldn't say he has more or less. I would say it's about even, basically from a talent perspective. Yet we're seeing John Morant do more, but we say that Steph Curry has had a quote-unquote MVP season. And like you say, when you look at win shares, Steph Curry may be there, but John Morant's not even on the list.
I think the interesting thing is, couple things. I don't necessarily disagree with the point. I get what you're saying. Couple things. One, they play the same position only in name only. And what I mean is, we know who the point guard is as far as initiating offense on that team is Draymond Green. And to your point, credit Draymond, because when Draymond was out, Steph was struggling a little bit early because he didn't have that guy out there to kind of set the table for him. So to your point, he missed Draymond. I will argue Memphis might not be in name, but I believe they're shooting. I would love, just off the top of my head, Dylan Brooks has shot it well this year. Bane, who they drafted from TCU, has shot the ball well. Grayson Allen has shot the ball well. I think Morant has a little bit more better shooters around him. I think his role players are slightly better, but to your point, I think we're splitting hairs. Like, I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying. I would just say, to this point, Steph, the numbers has really been gaudy to me. And I guess bigger picture, I thought some of the stuff I've heard about him in the last couple of years was just insane. And I'm just glad he was able to kind of get back. But I can't disagree with what you're saying, because they're missing Jaren Jackson Jr., who, I mean, he's missed all season. I heard he's getting ready to come back, and they're in the 8th seed. So you have no argument from me there. Those are great points. I would just say, though, I believe Memphis's supporting cast is a little bit better. And I know you watched the game, because I'm a huge Ja Morant fan. I mean, I was putting the record as saying I would have took him over Zion, as crazy as that sounds. But
wow.
Yeah, I like guards in this type of NBA.
Would you still stand on that opinion today?
Yeah, because I don't think it's too crazy. I'm not one of those people that, because Zion is playing well, it's not that I didn't think Zion wasn't going to be good. I looked at it from the standpoint, that's why the same thing with Luka. I thought Luka should have went number 1 that year. I thought he was the best player in the draft, because the game is about having creators. And when you have somebody, I feel like, who's dynamic, like a Ja Morant, a Luka Doncic, Ja has the springs, he could pass it. I just like my chances with them versus a Zion, because to me, I felt like I've seen Zion before. Like, people think that's crazy, but I'm from Chicago. I always reference this. There's a guy by the name of Paul McPherson, played at DePaul with Quinn Richardson. He's a shorter version, but I've seen the big, explosive, athletic guy before. But my issue, if it was one issue, is can he stay healthy? And so far, knock on wood, he continues to do that. So it wasn't like it was a big gap. That was just a preference thing for me. But to your point, again, I think Memphis has done a great job drafting down there. They know who they are as an organization, and they have not missed the last few years, whether it's Brandon Clark, whether it's Bane, whether it's the big guy from Michigan State who they signed to the highest second-round guaranteed money deal in history, who's played well for them. So I will argue Wiggins has played better than people think. If you actually watch them play, he's actually showing us a little bit what we thought he could be, but I'm not going to disagree with that, Hannibal.